Today we will discuss an infographic titled Population Patterns in Africa, published by Visual Capitalist, based on data from 2018 citypopulation.de, United Nations, CIA World Factbook, NASA. Population density is presented as a color gradient from black, 0 people per square kilometer, to blue, 80,000 people per square kilometer. The authors of this infographic note that the second largest continent is huge and diverse, inhabited by 1,400,000,000 people. In the upper right corner of the infographic, the 5 countries with the highest natural increase are listed: South Sudan 4.78%, Niger 3.66%, Burundi 3.59%, Equatorial Guinea 3.36%, Angola 3.34%. The largest African countries in terms of population are listed in the lower left corner: Nigeria, Ethiopia, Egypt, Democratic Republic of Congo, Tanzania. The presented figures have changed. Next to it is a list of the largest African metropolises: Cairo in Egypt, Lagos in Nigeria, Johannesburg in the Republic of South Africa, Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Luanda in Angola. This infographic is relevant in the context of media images depicting African migrants on dinghies arriving in Europe. Some of you, based on your emotions, may get the impression that countless masses of desperate people are waiting on the African shore of the Mediterranean Sea and that in a moment they will flood Europe, which is helpless in the face of such an element. Well, the data shows that nothing like this will happen. Africa is a continent 3 times larger than Europe in terms of land area. The area of Europe is 10.5 million square kilometers. Africa has an area of 30 million square kilometers. About 750 million people live in Europe. In Africa, 1,400,000,000. That's twice as many people in an area 3 times larger. It is easy to calculate that the population density in Africa is lower than in Europe. Looking at the map, I notice 6 main population centers on the African continent: the northern shore of the Gulf of Guinea, especially Nigeria, the area around Lakes Victoria and Malawi, the Nile Delta and Valley in Egypt, the Mediterranean coast with Algeria and Morocco, the Indian Ocean coast south of Maputo to East London. Almost the entire population of the continent lives in these highly uneven 6 regions, covering less than 10% of Africa's surface. Population density in Africa is very uneven. The authors of this infographic note that the Sahara has one of the lowest population densities on Earth. As a result, the continent is often classified as 2 separate regions: North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. In this belt, the population density in the Nile Valley and the Nile Delta is striking. Nearly 110 million Egyptians live in the valley of one river. The 3rd largest population in Africa after Nigeria and Ethiopia. The authors of the infographic indicate that the entire Nile Valley, not only in Egypt, is inhabited by a total of 257 million people, i.e. about 20% of the population of Africa. This fact makes us realize how lonely a continent Africa is, since 1/5 of the population lives in the valley of one river. Although the Nile is the longest river in the world. Nigeria's population is approximately 225 million. The 6th largest population in the world. But at the same time, Nigeria is the only country in the top 10 in terms of population size. The authors of the infographic note that the population of the capital of this country is growing by about 2,000 people a day. I encourage you to explore the Nigerian music scene. In such a market, local pop culture stars achieve huge reach. Movies and series are usually poor in terms of craftsmanship, but the plot is sometimes engaging. For those who are less patient, I recommend advertising on Nigerian television. Lake Victoria area, Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania. Burundi and Rwanda are among the smallest African countries with the highest population density, apart from island countries. Some analysts see the population density in this area as one of the triggers for the armed conflict in the 1990s. I note that every small country on Earth has a high density. Rwanda ranks 25th and Burundi 29th. However, if we exclude city-states and island countries, Burundi and Rwanda, after Bangladesh and Bahrain, have the highest population density on Earth. This example shows that population density is a local and regional phenomenon. If we look beyond the largest population centers in Africa, we notice that the color black dominates. Wasteland. And here's a little curiosity. After all, the largest land animals outside Africa were almost completely exterminated. Elephants, rhinos, hippos, giraffes, large buffaloes, lions and gorillas still live in Africa. If there were no space for humans in Africa, local people would exterminate these largest species as competition, threats, or as food. There are still cases of an elephant trampling a village at night, but basically there is so much space that large mammals dangerous to humans find refuge in the vast wastelands of most of the continent. High population density occurs primarily in urban areas. In the case of Ethiopia, the second largest population in Africa, 80% of the population is spread quite evenly throughout the country. The authors of the infographic mention this, as does the case of smaller Malawi. Africa is subject to the same trends as other continents. There is an observed tendency to move people from rural areas to cities. In the case of many African countries, but also some Asian and South American ones, urban and social problems in this area are more noticeable. However, unless the situation of internal migration is caused by an armed conflict, it can be considered that it is the choice of the population. Living conditions are very poor, but the labor market probably offers more economic opportunities or gives the illusion of getting higher on the social ladder. Not everyone is a winner after arriving in a large agglomeration. I dare say that the quality of life of an average migrant decreases after moving to a big city. But not only in Africa. Every year, thousands of young Americans leave large, comfortable houses with gardens scattered around villages and towns to squeeze into small rooms in housing estates of the 5 largest agglomerations. This is the same trend as in Africa, only the base is different and the level of development is different. Finally, as the population flows into large cities, it decreases in other areas. This means that population density in rural areas in Africa is decreasing, as it is happening all over the world. And here's a psychological observation. I would like to alert you to the association that the supposedly high population density is a negative phenomenon. If we look at the list of countries in the world that have the highest population density, the top of the table are mainly island countries and city-states. City countries are usually rich, e.g. Singapore, Monaco, Vatican, Malta. And small island countries rarely achieve high levels of development with the limited natural resources at their disposal. This shows that population density is a local, point-like phenomenon. If we ignore city-states or small island countries, the fourth on the list of countries with the highest population density is South Korea, the Netherlands 8th, Belgium 11th, and Japan 13th. These are not poor countries. High population density is not a problem if well managed. Before I expand on the last point, I will add a technical note. The average population density in a given country is information that does not add much. It is obvious that the population density is different in the center of a large city and in a rural commune. Nevertheless, please note that Africa's supposedly overdense population has no representation among the 10 most populated countries in the world. Moreover, in the second 10 there is only the small island country of Mauritius. In the third 10 there are Rwanda, Burundi, in the fourth 10 the islands of Comoros. The fifth most populous country in the world, Nigeria, is in 57th position. For comparison, the UK is 52nd and has a higher population density than Nigeria, Africa's most populous country. Out of 100 countries in the world with the highest population density, there are only 14 African countries, and among the first 50 there are only 4 African countries, including 2 islands. For example, European country Poland is 101st on this list. This means that 40 African countries, or as many as 3/4, have a lower population density than Poland. Thank you for your attention. I encourage you to check out the other infographics discussed on this channel, and I invite you to leave substantive comments under the video.